Okay, well, I've gotten the thumbs up that the video has started recording. So thanks, everyone, for being here today for the first meeting of the Auctioneer Law Modernization Task Force. Great to be in such august company as yourselves. And I wanted to get us kicked off first with introduction. So I'll start out. I'm Carter Lawrence. I'm the Assistant Commissioner here at the Department of Commerce and Insurance. And for the purpose of this task force, I'm the Commissioner's designee. Maybe rather than working through the agenda that we have, we'll just go around right to left and hand it off to Jeff.
Just to introduce ourselves, is that what you're...
If you would, please.
I'm Jeff Morris. I'm a member of the Tennessee Auctioneers Commission representing on this task force. I run an auction company down in Memphis, Tennessee.
I'm David Allen. I'm the president of the Tennessee Auctioneer Association.
I'm James Geary. I was the appointed member of the Tennessee Auctioneer Association.
Do I have to hit the button? No. Kenny Phillips, with Powell Auction Company in Knoxville.
Bob Weaver, President, Tennessee Automotive Association, representing the association.
I'm John Lyle. I'm the legal counsel of Tennessee Automotive Association.
I'm Clark Milner. For purposes of the task force, I am the public member.
I'm Bobby Wood. I'm on service at Tennessee Real Estate Commission.
I'm Will McLemore. I'm the president of McLemore Auction Company.
Fantastic. Well, we have more than the required 7 for a quorum, so I would say that we could get underway. I'd like to start us out by directing to Public Chapter 941 in order to talk about our purpose, move into the specifics before we get into the meat of the meeting. So first, our purpose is twofold, to conduct a comprehensive review of auction laws in the state, including rules of Tennessee Auctioneer Commission to study unnecessary barriers to entry into the profession, and 2, recommend changes and updates to auctioneer licensing laws to recognize the broad range of business models of auctioneers, auction firms, and auction platforms. Next, we have the composition of the task force as is set forward and as is represented here with only 2 absences. The Speaker's office had not yet gotten back to us with their 2 appointments, so still waiting for them. There's a possibility that in the next meeting we could have 2 additional people with us. As we mentioned, quorum is a majority, and all of the members have to be present to vote, which we take to be physical presence and not just a phone or other electronic means of joining. We are holding this within the first 90 days of the passage of the Act, which was May 15th, so we're actually on the early side of the 90 days, so we can rest assured that we're complying with that. And one of the other things that we were tasked with in D is to select a chair of this task force here in the first meeting. So I thought that after we finish working through this first section and talking about the specifics, we can move in to the selection of a chair. Further, as is shown in E, we're required to meet at least 4 times, and that in addition to be administratively attached to Department of Commerce and Insurance, that this task force is allowed to request aid and assistance from other state agencies. This is an unpaid, purely volunteer task force. And finally, the task force shall make recommendations for legislation for the next legislative session and report its recommendations to the chairs of Commerce and Labor Committee in the Senate and the Business and Utilities Committee of the House of Representatives on or before January 8th, 2019. And then at that point, we're done and we cease to exist. So having gone through the purpose that we were given in meeting here today and then the specifics of how these meetings will go about, before I pass off for us to select a chair, I did want to say, because I'd gotten a fair amount of questions and comments about whether there would be an opportunity for members of the public to speak, to address, I think it would be appropriate in the spirit of the open meeting that we're having, that we're trying to get as much consensus and information as possible, to set aside some time in this meeting, and then if the task force saw that it would be helpful in future meetings for the public to make some comment to us. So with that, I think I can stop and see if there was some comment about meeting one of our requirements of selecting a chair.
I'd like to nominate James Geary for chair.
A second.
Discussion?
I know that took me by surprise too. James, for those of you who don't know, and you may not want this, but now that it's out there, yeah. James is uniquely qualified for this position, in my opinion, because he is probably the only person on this task force who has been around long enough. He's in his mid-50s. He's been an auctioneer since he was 18. He knows why these laws that we're getting ready to examine came into legislation in the first place. So there would be a real understanding of why it was put on the books and a real understanding of why they may need to be altered, why they may need to be changed. And I don't know of anybody else who has the experience, and I don't know everybody here, but he would represent a unique perspective that I don't think any of the rest of us can offer. And that being said, I know he reluctantly would take it if it was offered, if he got it. But he would do he's about as fair a person and as open-minded as a person that's probably sitting on this panel.
Before we move forward, I just wanted to recognize that David Connor, potentially a victim of Nashville's traffic, has joined us. So thanks for coming. David, we went through introductions and then talked through the purpose for why we were here today. So maybe if I could just turn over and let you introduce yourself to the task force and to the public.
Apologize for being late. David Connor, I'm with the Tennessee County Services Association as representative of county governments. Both our trustees, court clerks, a number of different county officials have to work through the auction process to dispose of either property that may have been seized through a delinquent tax sale or surplus property of the government and other issues. So they had some concerns about how the laws might be adopted or changed.
We've got a motion and a second for James Gary to be the chair of this task force, and I'll see if there's further discussion. Okay. Seeing none, I think we could go ahead and vote. Do we need a voice vote or a roll call? Let's try by voice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Well,
No.
despite the one no, congratulations. And with that, I'd like to hand it off, see what direction you wanted to take us in for this, our first meeting.
This is completely blindsided. So,
Welcome to politics.
well, I guess with the keeping of the agenda, I guess it would be up to the pleasure of the group of where we're going to start, how we're going to structure this. Are we going to try to start with the laws? Are we going to try to start with the rules of the commission? I guess that would be the first thing, is just to get some input from other members of where we need to start.
Well, I was going to say the reason, as I understand it, the reason why we're all gathered here today is because back in 2016 in December, the Tennessee Auctioneer Association was asked by the TAC to address legislation on certain key points that they were having trouble getting clarification for. There were several smaller points which were immediately addressed by the Rules Committee that we sat in front of and told sort of what we'd like to see happen. But the big sort of elephant in the room was online auction. And the way the law had been written in 2006, there was some ambiguity about whether it applied to all online auction platforms, and the TAC was asking for clarification for that. So we went and spoke in front of the Rules Committee in 2016 in December, and they conveniently carved out that particular aspect of everything we were talking about so it could be voted on separately. They passed all of the other suggestions that were given and did not pass or suggest that it become a rule or give the support for a rule, as I understand that legislative process. And essentially what they said was, you need legislation. This isn't a rule. This is a law. You need to go back and write a law. So we wrote a law, the TAA did, with the help of our lobbyist, addressing online auctions, and then we found out there were other aspects of that had concerns that were being presented from the outside. barriers to the profession. How could we make it more streamlined to fit 2018? And so we attempted in our legislation to sort of address those issues. When it was presented to the legislature back in February, I guess it was, the end result of all of the different compromises and changes and omissions and additions was the creation of this task force. That was the only thing that we could get the legislature to agree to do, which was let's get everybody in a room and let's talk about let's get everybody in a room who believes they have a vested interest in this discussion to talk about where they want to see things go in auction law in Tennessee. How can we make it an easier business to get into? How can we update it to match 2018 technology? And so the task force, as I understand it, was formed with these particular people involved because we all seemingly have a vested interest in seeing what happens here. And the TAA is, to a certain extent, feels some sense of responsibility because we were the ones who advanced the legislation which morphed into this task force. And that's where we are today. So, I mean, it's a big can of worms that we can open up and take a worm out at a time, or we can just simply address key issues that we feel are worth addressing and not address other things. But as it says in the law, a comprehensive review of auction law, including the rules of the TAC, to study unnecessary barriers into the entrance to the profession. So I think we have to address how easy and or hard it is to become an auctioneer in the state of Tennessee. And then the second part of that is recommend changes and updates to the auctioneer licensing laws to recognize the broad range of business models in auctioneers, auction firms, and auction platforms. That is essentially online auctions. How are we going to deal with the phenomenon of online auctions? Because in 2006, what was considered an online auction is not necessarily what it is in 2018.
And I don't know if any of the members have even had copies of the law or the rules to even review, to look over. If y'all even had a chance to get any copies of the rules to look over to see about any kind of changes at all. Or if it's something you think that the TA, when he says TAA, that's the Auctioneers Association. TAC is the commission, of course. I mean, we've obviously thrown this around at meetings for the last year and a half, I guess, of different things that, might need to be tweaked. But I don't know how in depth we need to get in this meeting, if people need to have time to review stuff, or if we need to just throw out some ideas from the get-go. So as chair, recognize you, Will.
I have a question. Are we allowed to discuss substantive matters in this meeting because of the timing and the notice that was given for the meeting? Or are we limited by the sunshine provisions in the Tennessee Code? I'm not sure that we've had adequate notice in order to be able to dive into the content of what we were constituted for in this meeting, or if we're just supposed to set up the framework for future meetings here. And I don't know the answer to that.
I'm looking towards legal to see if maybe Mark Green, legal counsel, could provide some guidance on that.
I think you're perfectly within the right of the task force to discuss based on the notification that was given. I don't think there's any prohibition that limits you from discussing whatever topics, be they substantive or administrative or anything. I think the adequate notice has been given. It was posted last week, and obviously several folks are here, and so I think you're not constrained by any sunshine provision from discussing matters that the task force chooses to take up.
While you're still up here, Mark, could you weigh in on what obligations the task force will have in the future about conversations related to the task force, so outside of this meeting itself, will the sunshine apply?
Yes. This task force is created under the provisions of the Sunshine Act, meaning that business discussed and contemplated or deliberated on must be done in a public forum. So therefore, it would be a violation of Open Meetings Act or the Sunshine Act to deliberate and have discussions outside the public forum, and that's via face-to-face conversations or a group of you, having conversations, or telephone or email or texting or any type of conversations that talk about the business of the task force would be prohibited if it's not done within the confines of a public meeting that's been duly noticed. So
Thanks for the reminder. And if I could mention to the chair, or offer to the chair rather, that Commerce and Insurance would be happy to distribute by email whatever rules, laws you wanted to be sent out in the fashion that we already do, so that everyone is blind copied, so that we can preserve the sunshine and make sure that we're going to maintain compliance. So would be happy to do that.
I think that would be obviously one thing that I would think would definitely need to be done. The laws and the rules, because they commingle, quite honestly, a lot of the times. I guess one other item we could discuss right off the top are meeting dates. Are we at liberty to set the other 3 meeting dates? Some of us make a living at this, so we have to kind of know when we can schedule sales and auctions and things like that. So I kind of think that might be something that would be an advantage. And I would open it up for discussion of, if we think it should be a Monday in August, September, and October, or I'm just completely open to suggestions on that. But I thought that might be something that would be, do we need to schedule with some here, with the building, with the rooms, and that kind of thing?
Whatever the task force selects as its meetings date, we will work to accommodate. So the task force can choose what works for the task force, and then Commerce and Insurance will accommodate that.
Okay.
When I spoke to Madeline, she indicated, which was a great relief to me personally, that it was her understanding that typically what would happen is the second meeting would not happen until late August. Most people have already taken their summer vacations that they've already made plans for. Schools are back in session, that kind of thing. And I think she even threw out, and I don't know what day it is, she even threw out something like August 25th would probably be the second meeting. Now, I'm not looking at my calendar, but what day, do we know what day that is?
That's a Saturday, sir.
Okay, well, it's not it wouldn't be a Saturday, yeah. It's a Monday, and she also said it's a Monday through Friday thing. Correct. So
TAC has one on the 20th, so hopefully we won't do it on that day.
Okay. This may take us the rest of the morning.
Well, the 27th and 28th might be a good day.
Monday's good for everybody?
Or we could do it on the 21st, that Tuesday, it doesn't matter to me. If Tuesday works.
Oh, well, that because your TAC meeting.
I'd like to do it on the 27th. I'm going to be grandpa-ing the week before, so.
Okay. All right.
So that's in the form of a motion, sir?
Yes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded for our next meeting to be August 27th, 9 a.m. Sufficient for everybody? Questions on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Well, we've got one thing done.
There you go, man. You're rolling.
Do we want to further that from here, or would you rather wait till the August meeting to set the ones in September and after?
I would prefer to set them now.
We have to have 4 meetings, this being the first one.
Yeah.
So we need to go ahead and set 2 more meetings.
Yeah, let's do that. And if we want additional ones.
Make it
September?
The 17th and the 24th are Mondays. Is that a good day for everybody?
The 24th is
Somewhere.
How about the 17th?
17th work for everybody in September? Mr. Assuming that was a motion. And do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Phillips. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, do we want to hit October or November for the last one?
I would say hit October.
I would
That
too, in case we need to come back and change something, depending on how things are going.
Right.
22nd
22nd or the 29th are Mondays.
22nd looks good to me.
Make a motion, we do the 22nd of October.
You good with that, Jeff? Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, let's got that down. So from that, I would recommend, I don't know if we need this in the form of motion, that we have the auction laws and the auction rules emailed to everybody for their review between now and then if they haven't already done so. If we can get that done, I think
I'll follow up both with the meeting dates and
Okay.
with the laws and rules sent in the
Okay.
same email.
Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, we've got 5 auctioneers on the panel. We've got real estate, automobile. Everybody's got a different viewpoint about what we're meeting about. And I think it would be good to hear from each of the members today about what they hope to gain or what their concerns are about the auction laws as it affects them and what they're looking for from this task force.
Sounds like a good judgment, and since you started it, Jeff, I think you'll be the first one to go.
I'll be happy to. Yeah, on the TAC, we struggle with online auctions at every meeting. There's what we call the Ebay Exclusion, which basically says that if there's an auction and it's online and it's timed, then anybody holding those auctions is exempt from any jurisdiction of the TAC. If it extends at all, that's our position, then it's now become a live auction, and now that auctioneer becomes under the purview of the Auction Commission. And a lot of people are conducting online auctions with that exclusion. And there's a couple other exclusions for automobiles and different things for the insurance companies and that sort of thing that are in there. But the original reason for having this discussion for us from the very beginning was to get a better clarification, a better definition, and have the time listing actually incorporated into the law. And so that we would have a little bit more teeth with the people that we dealt with. Now, if it's the will of the legislature or this committee or however to exempt all online auctions, and we can have that discussion. We just need clarification on the commission about what is under our purview and what are we to be looking for in terms of watching the conduct of online auctioneers. Live auctioneers, it's pretty cut and dried. We know who they are. They have to have a license and that sort of thing. In order to actually help the commission too, we were looking for some changes in some of the entry provisions in terms of getting people licensed in this state. Tennessee is one of the hardest states in the union to get an auctioneer license in. You got to have a 2-year apprenticeship. You got to have an auction log. You got to do all these different things. Other states don't have such provisions. Some do, some don't. There's a lot of states in the union that don't have any auction laws or licensees. When you go west of the Mississippi, the majority of the states don't have it. But over on the east side of the Mississippi, we're looking at licensed states. I'm also the president of NAOLA, which is the National Association of Licensed Law Officials of America. It's a mouthful. But we look at license laws in every state, and we try to bring some cohesiveness across the states about what auction laws should be, what they shouldn't be, what problems they're having, and that sort of thing. And every state does it differently. There's not very many states that do it exactly the same on the east side of the Mississippi River. So if we can come up with a more streamlined approach to having people gain access to becoming alternate, we do not want to be a barrier to business. That's the main thing. We've seen Supreme Court decisions that really hold states accountable for creating barriers and to prohibit competition through licensing, and we don't want to do that in this state. And we want to have everybody who wants to be an auctioneer be one. And we want to make it easy for them. We want them to be educated. We want to be responsible. We want them to take care of people's money and to be diligent with the care of that money. But that's the main things that we're looking for. And so if we can look at some of the changes that the TAA is looking at, they've made some good proposals as far as making some changes to that law in terms of apprentice auctioneers, education, that sort of thing. And I think there's some good points there that help ease entry into the business. But once you're in, the TAC is looking for clarification about exactly who comes under our authority and who does not, so that there's not a lot of gray. And that's what we're looking for.
When this came up a couple of years ago, one of the things that came out in the discussion was that if you were conducting an online auction, there was no oversight and there was no education associated with your conduct. And as someone who does both live and online auctions, I felt that I personally felt, and it became, we voted as a membership, and it was a near unanimous decision with a couple of dissenting members, but overall the vast majority felt like online auctions needed to have the same types of educational process, because the only difference between someone conducting an online auction where it is what they call extended time, and it may be important for the group to understand, we're talking a language they may not understand.
Right.
So let me just very quickly explain the real differences of what we're talking about. What we call a timed auction in an online setting means that it will stop at a certain time of the day, and that is the end of the auction. So if you are the highest bidder, and you and it's 5 o'clock Central Standard Time on a Wednesday, that auction ended, you won. Well, when the eBay law was created in 2006, that was essentially the only type of online platform available to anyone selling in an auction method. However, the past 12 years has seen the development of software where you can have what's called extended timed listings or auctions. And what that is let's say it is scheduled, the original deadline is 5 o'clock Wednesday, Central Standard Time, but at 4:58, somebody places a bid. Well, the software allows that auction to continue on another additional few minutes, depending on what the auctioneer has indicated. So essentially, that turns it exactly into an auction. It is no different than an auctioneer standing up there with a microphone and asking for any additional bids from the audience. The difference is only electronic. The computer is asking the collective body, is anybody out there wanting to bid again, because you got 3 minutes to do it. If someone does bid again, then they extend it another 3 or 5 minutes or whatever has been set according to that particular auction. And it goes until the highest, best bid is recognized by the computer. Nobody bids those last 3 minutes, and whoever was the high bid, they won it. But it may end at 6:15 because people kept bidding against each other to get to the high bid. Well, that is exactly like an auctioneer standing in front of a crowd and going back and forth between bidders until there is no more bid and he says sold or she says sold. And in one instance, there is education and oversight, and in another instance, there is absolutely no education and oversight, and yet it's the exact same business. The exact same issues that would come up from the person who has the education and the oversight. This person in the online, they need to know, all of the things that the person that the auctioneer did, the live auctioneer did. And Jeff addressed the notion of regulation. One of the things that seems to come out in the discussion of any type of regulation is how are we protecting the public? And usually the public is protected in one of three ways. If you're dealing with their personal health in such a way, there is usually some type of education and oversight. In other words, if you're a doctor, you've got to go learn to be a doctor because you could physically hurt somebody. If you are somehow can damage their personal property in such a way, if you're an electrician and you want to build a house, you have to know what you're doing so the house doesn't burn down. And the other is economic. And that is, if you're a securities trader, you have to have some knowledge and understanding of security laws that govern you so you don't, do insider trading or lose people's money or whatever. And to a certain extent, auctions are a billion, if not trillion-dollar industry in our country, and we just feel like the TAA just feels like it is important that if you're going to participate in the auction business model, that you need to have some type of education and oversight, just like a live auctioneer has to have education and oversight. And where the discrepancy comes is because the TAC does not know how to recognize online auctions, because currently the way the law is written, people are using the 2006 eBay law, which was specifically designed only for timed listings, as a way to not have to be not have to have a license to do it. And that was our concern. Or one of our concerns was online auctions, and I think one of the goals of this task force is to say we still want to be licensed as auctions, and we need to recognize that online auctions are here, and how can we make it a more streamlined process for someone who wants to become an auctioneer. And so that was the purpose of our legislation, which led us to here. But the elephant in the room is online auction, and I think we're all in agreement. I mean, most of the TAA is in agreement with most of the people we've talked to about making a more streamlined approach to becoming an auctioneer. We've already talked about some of the things we think could happen to do that. So that's my thought.
And to follow up on that, if Kenny is having what's called a simulcast auction, where he has it online and live at the same time, then he automatically has to have a license. So it even marries up into that as far as the online part is concerned. That's another part of it,
yeah.
That you can have the simulcast where you have bidders in the room bidding against the computer, but that automatically throws Kenny or any other auctioneer to having to have license. I'm going to pass, and you're next.
Okay. Well, just to continue on with it, one thing that's happening in our area is all these companies, estate sale, tag sale companies, they're all doing online auctions, and they have no license. They're not protecting the public at all. Most of them don't have escrow accounts, any kind of licensing, and that's a big issue to me, because we're always holding hundreds of thousands of dollars of the public's money, and then you got somebody doing online auctions, and there's no accountability to anyone. They got no one to go to other than going back to court and suing them to try to recover their funds if they fail to get paid. And one other thing, I guess, you got out-of-state companies conducting sales in Tennessee, real estate and personal property, and a lot of them don't have Tennessee license. So I think that's something else that needs to be looked at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob Weaver with the other TAA, which is Tennessee Automotive Association. Our involvement stemmed as the legislation went through the process. We have auto auctions, which are wholesale auctions between dealers, of which there are several major auctions in the state of Tennessee, both large and small. You've got public automobile auctions, which is a creature of the legislature from several years back, which sought to provide a framework so that clean title was was delivered to a buyer at the time of sale with certain consumer protections built in, one of which ensuring that the buyer at that sale of that vehicle received Consumer Protection Act rights in case of a material misstatement or failure to deliver good title. We think those are good, valid, and they seem to work. Also, the free exchange of motor vehicles between dealers through the auction format is a critical piece for both independent and franchise dealers. So as the discussion took place, much like Mr. Connor mentioned earlier, being directly involved in that piece as it involved motor vehicles is why we asked and the legislature granted us a representation on this. As an aside, I'd say, having had the privilege of representing this organization for 32 years, I've been around when most of these amendments to the law have taken place, whether it be from the eBay conversation to the public automobile auction law to the auto auction law. And so in trying to determine who might be the best representatives of our association, we kept coming back to, well, you're the only one who's been here through all these iterations, so we think you ought to do it. So that's the reason I'm here. And so certainly I want to be contribute to the end result. I come in with no preconceived notions other than what I see from our slice of this question. What we have seems to work, and I'll be interested and try to be of assistance to the group as we make these deliberations.
My experience with the auction business is I've written all these amendments to them. Matter of fact, the Tony's bill years ago, the public auto auction, I wrote those amendments. Are we in a combination with Bob and Tony? So I know little or nothing about it, but I know that, like you were talking about these timed or untimed, what does the public understand it? The public that feels like they're getting shafted, then you got a problem.
As the public member, I hope we're not getting shafted, but I probably know the least about this area. I found out yesterday I was going to be on this task force, and as noted, I'm the public member, so I guess just to channel some of the things I've already heard, I think it sounds like obviously trying to look out for the general public's concerns. We want to make sure that the public's being protected from anyone that might take advantage of them, while also ensuring that there isn't unreasonable other cost to members of the public. So look forward to working with you all and look forward to learning more about this business.
Well, my primary, I guess, focus on being real estate and try to figure out what in the world I was going to be talking about or hearing about today. I spent the last 48 hours reading your rules, so I come to you right now saying, with that much knowledge, I am grossly underqualified in telling you how to fix your business. So I think I'm more along the line. I'd prefer to hear what y'all have to say, but you have we have some parallel issues in our business and real estate too. I mean, there's a line somewhere between you want to create less barriers to your business, but you got to protect the public, and you can't just let everybody be auctioneers and create auctions. I mean, and I've already expressed that with some of the members today. We've got that in our real estate industry right now, and I refer to it as reality TV real estate. I mean, they see things that'd be cool to hold offers and hold things, and they're literally, we have people that are now doing auctions that are real estate agents, and it's kind of a semi-auction, and so I come to you going, I'm interested to see some of the things you do and what kind of parallels it's going to be in our real estate field. So,
I've been speaking and reaching out by email and other ways to court clerks, trustees, purchasing agents of local government, those folks, as they utilize these quite a bit, both to sell things off and in some cases for purchasing. And I get a mixture of, many of them use live auctions, particularly if they're dealing with real estate. They also have a lot of just huge amounts of property sometimes that have been seized or has been abandoned or something that they have to dispose of, and in those cases they may use online auctions. Trying to get more detail as to the procedures they're using on that, as to whether it matters if they are specifically timed or if there's an extension. I think some of what I'm hearing is concerns that in some cases, if you've got a major public works department that's trying to sell off some big piece of equipment, it may really only be useful to other public works departments and other local governments across the country. They're looking more towards online platforms in order to be able to get a national audience for that. I think some of the concern would be if Tennessee's laws change in such a way that some of the major online platforms they're using right now they can't use anymore, because now those companies have to come and get licensed in Tennessee or in all 50 states. That could end up, whether or not those companies would do that, they may not come here. They may not get licensed, and if they're not licensed under Tennessee, then that shuts them out of that avenue of something to be able to use. So I think that's the area I'll continue to try to get information from our members and staff of county agencies about. But
I want to take a moment to go over a timeline I think is important for us all to understand, because there have been some things said in the meeting so far that are not strictly accurate. And this is an issue that's been fought over since 2006, so it's been 12 years now. And there's some, the legislature in Tennessee deregulated online auctions in 2006. And that was a matter of public record. Everyone could see that if you conducted an auction that did not constitute the simulcast of a live auction, then it was free from regulation. That there is a statute that says that, and that statute is still valid today. And there were a lot of companies that read the law, understood what it meant, opened businesses, and established business practices back in as far as 2006. Based on the decision made by the Tennessee legislature. And to pretend that that didn't happen or was limited in its impact is problematic. And it's problematic because we can't do the work that we need to here in this task force and come out with a situation where we're not taking a fight back to the legislature next session. In 2006, the technology did exist to do extended time auctions. And the first auction that I did with my company was an extended time auction, took place in February of 2007, and that technology had existed for many years at that point. And so the issue was not a lack of clarity about the meaning of that statute, and it didn't really become much of it wasn't that important, or it didn't seem to be that important until several years later when market share began to shift online. There was a big transformation of the auction business that gathered steam beyond that point until you get to about 2013, when you can read in the Tennessee Auction Commission newsletter an interpretation of that statute that said that if your auction does not constitute the simulcast of a live auction, you're exempt. And in 2013, in the Tennessee Auction Commission newsletter, there's a sidebar that says that that's true, but if you do extend the bid, then you are subject to regulation, same as any other auctioneer in the state. And that was surprising to read in 2013, because that's not how it had been interpreted from 2006 until 2013. And then in 2014, in order to clarify that position, because I think it may have come under a little bit of scrutiny to publicize the interpretation of a rule that way in the newsletter, there was a rulemaking hearing, and the members of the commission moved to clarify the rule related to extended time auctions, so that if you did not close your auction specifically at a moment in time, which is the way that eBay does it and still does it today, but if you said that if someone bids in the last period of time in your auction, it would extend the auction for a period of time, and which is the way that my company conducts its auctions. We say if someone bids in the last 5 minutes, then we're going to extend the auction closing time for an additional 5 minutes, and the auction ends when no one's bid for 5 minutes. there was a clarifying rule passed by the commission and submitted to the Attorney General in 2014. And the Attorney General read the rule, from what I understand, and didn't act on it for, I think it was about 2 years. And finally, in 2016, submitted the rule back and passed it and put it into effect. And I became aware that the rule didn't go into effect until it was submitted before the Joint Government Operations Committee and of the legislature's joint committee, House and Senate members, and they have to approve the rules. It's unusual for them not to approve rules, but it does happen. And I understood that there was an opportunity to go and discuss this, and so we organized a group to go down and say, hey, this is a complete change to the way that the auction business has been regulated in Tennessee since 2006. It is, in effect, a new regulation. The state had deregulated this. The Auction Commission has asked for this rule, which would regulate it. And the legislature's Joint Government Operations Committee gave a negative recommendation on the new rule. And so it was attached to the omnibus bill, and it went out of effect at the conclusion of the 2017 or 2016 session, I believe it was. Then, as David Allen had mentioned, it did become clear that the only way to address the matter, to offer the clarity regarding extended time auctions, would be to go back before the legislature with a new bill, which a new bill came into the 2016-2017 session and it did not pass. It was withdrawn in the Senate committee, I believe. Not sure exactly which committee, Senate Business Committee, whatever one it was that regulates that nature of. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, that Senate committee, it was withdrawn, and then at the beginning of the 2017-2018 session, it was resubmitted by Mark Gravitt, who's a legislator and a legislator and an auctioneer, and it received a co-sponsor in the Senate and made its way through and was amended into the bill that constitutes this task force. So we have been working on this since 2006, and it's not good to go into a situation where we don't acknowledge exactly what the history is, and also to present information in that it has not already, this has been before the legislature 3 times. And the legislature has constituted this task force, as far as I understand it, to make sure that we don't go back a 4th time and without something that we can agree upon. In 2006, when I founded my company, I read the law. I understood what the eBay exemption meant. And when I did live auction, I understood I'm regulated by the Tennessee Auction Commission. But when I did online auctions, which quickly became the bulk of my business, I understood that the Tennessee Auction Commission rules and the Tennessee auction law did not apply to me because it was specifically exempted in the statute. And so I began to make business decisions based on that exemption in 2006. And here we are 12 years later. I'm still working within the exemption, and I don't welcome the feeling that folks have implied that we should have interpreted that a different way or should have ignored it. It's Tennessee law. And we read it, and we made business decisions based on it. And to reverse them will have financial implications not only for me, but also for the state itself. There are employers who have built businesses in that exemption that have employed a lot of people. And there has been a considerable amount of uncertainty created that has squelched economic development based on the fact that you don't know exactly how this issue will resolve itself. And we've been to the legislature 3 times to discuss it. First in the Joint Government Operations Committee, second in the 2016-2017 session, and then again in the 2017-2018 session. So I wanted to say that and try to give my the understanding of the history of the issue that we're discussing here as best I could, and I may have made some mistakes, but if so, just please bring them up, because I don't think that we can do any good if we don't acknowledge exactly where we have come from. But that being said, there are a couple of issues that are on my mind as I sit around the table with work to be done here. The first is the need for the regulation of the online auction business. And it seems like if there were a big problem with unregulated auctions, that there would have been a spate of lawsuits or disputes. There would have been a history that would have been borne out within Tennessee since 2006, when the legislature deregulated online auctions. And to my knowledge, that's not been the case. It's also important to look at context. In the United States, 25 states don't regulate auctioneers at all. And I think it is now 6 that regulate online auctions in some way. The state of Pennsylvania is one, and at this very moment, they are considering bills that would eliminate the auction regulation in that state altogether. So it's important to understand the context of what we're looking at and to see if there's a way where we can simultaneously protect the interests of the public, but also make certain that access to earning a living in this profession is not limited to those who are financially capable of serving for 2 years in an apprenticeship or obtaining the education necessary to participate. The other issue is there's an opportunity for us to take a look at the statute as a whole to do some things that I think we all probably could mutually agree upon need to be done. If there is to be an auction statute, which I think, I'm sitting at this table and I would be negotiating in good faith going forward, I think we can end up where there is one. But there's some other things that we should definitely address, and I'm glad to see my colleagues from the automobile business, because some of the things that I think need to be addressed pertain to the sale of automobiles by auctioneers, particularly in the settlement of small estates or business liquidations that may have some rolling stock in their inventory that we would be discussing as to how to sell. That's been an issue that has probably got more history than even the regulation of online auctioneers in Tennessee, and I'm well aware of it. But I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page here. I see that we've got some heavy lifting to do to figure out how to regulate auctioneers with doing the least amount of harm possible to those who have already acknowledged what the state did in 2006 and acted accordingly, and to look closely at the need to impose regulations on a business that has been operating without it since that time.
So first, Clark had asked whether it'd be fine for him to leave around 10 o'clock, and while I was still the chair, I told him that was fine, so I hope that's okay.
I'm going to handcuff him.
All right, fantastic. And he had asked that I pass along his apologies.
Certainly.
So as to the question of the goal, or what we saw as the goal, what we hope to get out of it, at Commerce and Insurance, we are tasked with enforcing the law, and so here we're chiefly interested in making sure that the General Assembly's desire to see a review of the laws and rules is effected, and then I would say that we are particularly interested in the secondary call to review the barriers to entry that might exist. So that, I would say that's what we are interested in here.
Follow up on something from you, Will, and I'm going to defer to you, Jeff. Maybe I think 2 times that I was at one of the auction commission meetings, someone had turned someone in for online. I don't even know, because I don't think y'all were even able to discuss it, because the attorney told y'all basically that you had no legal standing. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, if we get a complaint and we get, and I can get the number, and I think you can help me pull those records of how many complaints we get each year. But we're getting more and more complaints about online auctions. But if it comes up as an online auction, then we just have to say that falls falls outside of our purview. We can't do anything about it, so we have to dismiss the case, and we've had to dismiss several of those because of that provision in the law.
Not arguing your points at all, Will. Just bringing that up, and I think it's important to know that if I'm correct, since you don't have the ability to have any teeth in that part of the law, an online company can sell vehicles, real estate, I assume. I don't know. I know that there's laws in place you're supposed to have a real estate license, but I don't know where that falls, and I don't know if that's happening more than we realize or just some, but that's something I think everybody needs to keep in mind too. That it not only has to do with personal property, which I think the bulk of it is, and like Mr. Connor said, you have a lot of those companies, and I think if we do get to the point of looking at regulating online companies, we're going to have a hard time regulating somebody that business is outside this state, I would think. It would seem to me like, which there are several that have platforms that you can do.
I'd like to address something. Will went over a timeline that I'm absolutely convinced he is convinced is accurate with all of the information, but that may or may not necessarily be accurate. And in 2006, while he may have practiced extended time online, it was not a common aspect of the online bidding platform. Most of the auction companies in the United States, that phenomenon has blown up exponentially over the past 4 or 5 years, and I still go back to the notion that online auctions, and while you want to say it's a law, and it is a law, but laws change. Laws need to adapt to new circumstances. Laws need to be modified to recognize, because if we're going to take the stance that in 2006 it was a law and we should just not worry about it for the rest of time, then we don't need to be meeting here. We'll just leave all the laws that are in place they're on the books in place. But I think the purpose of this task force should be to examine, taking into account that in 2006 that's the world we lived in, but we're living in a different world now, and online auctions are here to stay. They are not going to ever go away, and there may be businesses that were created 10, 12 years ago that understood that and are concerned, and I get it, Will. I would, if I were sitting in your place, I would be having the same types of rationales that you have, but at the same time, it's an uneven playing field for people in the auction industry as a whole. If one entire segment of people, simply because they are using an online platform, are able to perform that business in one way, and another part of the industry is doing exactly the same thing, except they're doing it in a live format, but they have to have education, they have to have oversight, they have to respond to the commission, when asked to do so. I just think that that's a problem we are going to have to address with this task force.
Let me get Will first.
Okay.
Please.
I was just going to say, as far as I'm concerned, after the Joint Government Operations Committee gave the rule interpretation, or they gave that particular rule a negative recommendation, I was happy just to carry on. But the Tennessee Auctioneers Association brought legislation, and that's fine. That's the way you're supposed to do it. But I would have been happy just to let things be the way they were, because we're operating, we're making money, we're being successful, and there are others who are doing the same. The other thing that I'd mentioned, David, what you're getting at is not a level playing field. And there's a way of looking at auction regulation where you can say, hey, I understand where you're coming from. You're saying, look, it's not fair that I had to serve a 2-year apprenticeship and I have to have 4 licenses in order to sell a piece of real estate at auction. That's not fair for me to have to do all these things that others don't.
Because it's just two, so we're clear.
Well, it's not. It's you got to have four, but two of them have to do.
Oh, two firm. Right. Okay, that's what you're saying. Yeah.
But to do a live auction, you got to have two licenses to do that. It's not fair that I have to do that and others don't. Well, I agree with that. But that doesn't mean that you fix that problem by taking something that was not necessarily in the public interest or in the interest of the state and imposing that on a business that heretofore had been unregulated. There's the possibility that the proper way to address it is to say, well, you know what? There wasn't a need for that in the first place, and let's level the playing field the other direction. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the right way to do it, but I'm saying that I can sympathize with the argument to say, hey, it's not fair. It's not a level playing field. But let's look and see, since 2006, have we had a raft of fraud in this state that has to do with online auctions? And I'm not aware that we do. Now, maybe you've seen some complaints there, but do you have statistics to see that you have more complaints or about a larger amount of business being complained about since 2006? We don't have those statistics, and I know that we've actually, the members of the Joint Government Operations Committee requested the statistics and did not get them. So, I mean, we've asked for that before, and it is a statistical matter, and it's certainly possible that there has been more fraud. I don't know. But I don't think that's the case, and I'm not seeing anyone been able to present statistics that would indicate that there had been more fraud since 2006.
Will, if I can ask you a question. You said that your business would be hurt by licensing laws of online. How would that be? You have a license already, right?
I do.
Okay. I was just curious. I'm trying to see where you're coming from there.
No, it's a good question. It's not me personally that would be hurt, except in that I would no longer be able to work with folks who have been working in my business now for 10 years that have administered online-only personal property auctions during that period of time and have done so as their sole means of earning a living. This would send them back to auction school, send them to a 2-year apprenticeship, and then impose a license an obligation on them that they may not choose to complete. And so I may lose associates in my firm that I've been working with for a long time that have served the public well due to the new regulations that be imposed on them.
It might be easier to address by fixing it where we could hire people that can take consignments and stuff that don't have to be licensed, and just the firm be licensed. We might want to look at that.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I would be very open to a discussion of a single firm license to regulate all auctions in the state. I think that's a great idea.
What we've looked at or have talked about on the commission is we want, when we get complaints from the public, we need to have a person that we can point to that's responsible for that auction. It doesn't have to be the guy that booked that auction, but it has to be at least the guy running that company, so that if there's an auctioneer and he's doing online auctions and he has, say, 20 sales guys under him or whatever it is, at least the auctioneer has got to be responsible for whatever takes place in that company. And we're just looking for somebody to hold responsible either for the money or for misrepresentation about what's being sold. I mean, that's the biggest two complaints that we get. Either I didn't get my money, I didn't get paid, or what I bought wasn't what the guy told me it was. Go ahead.
You know that's not the way the law is written right now. That's not at all what it says. And if the online auctions were subject to it, we'd be subject to the apprenticeship for 2 years. They go into 90 hours or 80 hours, 85 hours. I'm not exactly sure of auction school. A good portion of which has to do with outcry bid calling. Not that the curriculum couldn't be changed, but a good portion of it isn't relevant to online only auctions. Kenny, I think what you've suggested is to look at the auction so that there's a firm in the auction business, so long as they've got a person who is answerable to the auction commission, and that could be if there were fraud, if there were something that was not in the public interest, they could be brought down and have a discussion with the commission about it. I think that's great. I'm not opposed to regulation in general. What I am opposed to is The commission, looking at the changing auction business and trying to impose an antiquated law from about 1968 onto a business that's operating in 2018. And the other thing, Kenny, that would be affected is the motor vehicle sales. The statute 55 is a lengthy, difficult to understand statute that does make reference to the auction law in the auction statute itself. And I think that if the online auction exemption were removed, it would impact the way that vehicles could be sold in the state. It's not at all clear, and I don't think it's been before a judge, and I think that the statute itself is problematic. But there's certainly more than one reason why I've opposed trying to regulate online-only auctions since 2006. One is human resources, and the other is motor vehicle sales.
Because you're able to sell them where a licensed guy is really prohibited.
I believe that Statute 55 references the Tennessee Auction Commission auction law, and if you read the auction law, it's got the exemption written right into it. And so if you look at Statute 55's reference to the auction statutes, I think that it's perfectly legal to sell a motor vehicle at online-only auction in Tennessee right now. I don't know that it was designed that way by anyone's intent, but I think that that's what the statute says.
Well, Bob Weaver, Tennessee Automotive Association, since I guess the question was directed in our direction. 5517, which is really the part that talks about vehicle sales, certainly is a statute that has been litigated and held constitutional in all aspects. The references you may have is there's a licensure for the auto auctions, which is the wholesale exchange of vehicles between dealers. There's the direct reference in the public automobile auction law, which is a later creature of statute, which did have concurrent jurisdiction because you had both the auction process and the sales directly to the public. And that does have some nuances that were put into that statute, primarily designed to give consumer protections to the public, because you've now engaged in a model very similar to a motor vehicle dealer selling vehicles directly to the public. The issue then became, well, who owns the vehicle? Who's the seller in the eyes of the law in terms of standing good for any misrepresentations, as has been earlier said. I think that's pretty clear. There's other exceptions to the general statute, some dealing with heavy construction equipment, some dealing with a special sale circumstance with heavy-duty trucks. It's coming out of a fleet, let's say, of truck operator. All of that, I think, is we've found very few issues being raised with that being problematic to either understand either by the folks affected by those direct provisions, but certainly it's been one that's gone through the legislative process and clearly explained along the way of how it's supposed to work. Now, as to your assertion that can we sell them unlicensed, I'm not prepared to say yes you can or no you can't, but I think that's one of the issues as you raise you want this task force to look at, and we'll certainly look at it. But at the end of the day, we're going to look to see, well, where is the recourse to the consumer? Several years ago, we supported an effort by the Attorney General and Division of Consumer Affairs and extended the protections of the Consumer Protection Act to an out-of-state consumer who purchased a vehicle in Tennessee. We thought that was the right thing to do. And therefore, if there's any material misrepresentation regarding that vehicle, there's going to be a recourse for that injured consumer. So a lot of our discussions and a lot of our contributions are going to be kind of aimed in that direction. And so that's what I have on that. At some point, Mr. Chairman, I think the department felt that we've got folks in the audience. They might like to have some comment from the public. And before we adjourn, I'd like to offer them that opportunity.
Any of the group have anything right now? If not, we'll open it up to that. Just if you have anything to say, just go to the mic, identify yourself, and give us your thoughts.
Chairman Bob Weaver, I would like the opportunity to perhaps should have done what Mr. Wood did, which I compliment him for, which is download a copy of the auction law. I know it's going to be sent to us. I, for one, am looking forward to reviewing that. And Mr. McLemore, I'll go back and look at those cross-references that you suggest. I'm familiar with the one dealing with the auto auctions and the public automobile auction, but I'll certainly review that. Certainly more familiar with 5517.
5517-109.
Activities for which a license is required.
Section D.
Okay.
And you can update us on.
Quickly, before we begin there, Chairman, in order to help facilitate better discussion, I think what I could do, in addition to emailing the laws and rules, as I had already mentioned that I would, I could also make available at our next meeting iPads with the materials on them as well, so that we can all look at the materials in unison.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tony Thompson, and John referred to me earlier. I thought I'd just go ahead and break the ice for those of us in the audience. I know some of you on the task force, and I have a little bit of history with these issues. Years ago, I can't remember if it was 2006 or before, but at some point, I believe the association brought some legislation that attempted to require folks selling online to obtain an auctioneer license to get at people using eBay. And at that point, I was hired by eBay. I'm an attorney and registered lobbyist in the state, and I was hired by eBay to oppose that law. And that's where we wound up with regard to the online auctions. Some years later, I worked for some folks, Mr. Phillips included, in the private auctioneer industry to help pass a bill that now allows this public automobile auction law. And that's been years ago. I can't remember when. Today, and most importantly, I represent a company called Insurance Automobile Auctions, and they are in the primary business of selling salvaged automobiles, not to the general public, but to licensed dealers, dismantlers, rebuilders, scrappers, and the like. They perform online and live auctions simultaneously. And the reason that we're here and the reason I got involved on their behalf is because the original legislation that was introduced attempted to, well, as I understand it too, my client is regulated under the Tennessee Auctioneer Commission and the Tennessee Vehicle Commission. And the original legislation sought to exempt our primary competitor from the Auctioneers Commission license. And we stepped forward just to say, hey, we're in the same business. We want to be treated the same way. And the legislation, as it was drafted, as introduced, did not treat the two companies differently because they're, frankly, formed differently. But that's our interest. Our primary interest is, well, first of all, we think that the double regulation is over-regulation. We don't deal with the public at all. And the second thing is that we want to be treated the same as our competitor.
Mr. Thompson, but you said that your firm or who you represent does both live or simulcast and online both.
Yes, sir.
So they have a license already, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And they use, when they do live auctions, when a live auction is involved, they use a licensed Tennessee auctioneer.
Mr. Thompson, when you spoke of the eBay rule in 2006, of which I believe you were the lobbyist for that passage, was that correct?
I was first hired by eBay to oppose a law that attempted to regulate
Right.
individuals who used eBay.
Right.
That's right. And
Yeah.
we were successful in opposing that proposal.
And just as a point of clarification, because this goes back to auction speak again, what the TAA and the auction industry was concerned with at the time was not that people were utilizing eBay, because I imagine everybody in the audience is familiar with how eBay works. If I have something of my own possession and I want to sell it, I'll put it on eBay and apply to their rules, pay their commissions, and ship it off to that person. What we were concerned with at the time were brick and mortar stores. There were some that had, I believe the name of one of them was Snappy Auctions or something like that, and their business model was essentially, if you, Joe Public, bring an item to our store, we'll do this for you on eBay, but we're going to take a commission for that, which in 2006, the auction community read as, well, they're just performing as auctioneers. Because what we do is we take in consignment from various people for various reasons, we sell it, and then we give them their proceeds back after having taken a commission for our services. And just so everybody is clear, no one is against regulating online auctions on any platform, be it Facebook, be it Etsy, be it any type of format you can think of in an online setting where you're selling your own stuff in an online setting. No one is against that, and no one is supporting legislation which would prohibit that or regulate that in any way. What this task force is supposed to address is when the online auction business model incorporates somebody taking stuff from somebody else, selling it on their behalf, and then taking a fee for that, a commission for that. That is what is defined as an auctioneer, if they're using the auction method of business model. So I just want to make sure that when people hear the word eBay, they automatically, well, not automatically, but many times they think, well, gosh, I want to be able to sell grandma's dolls when she passes away, and I'm not using an auctioneer. I'm just going to put it on eBay myself. They're my dolls. I can do what I want to do with them. This is not what we're trying to regulate and or address. We're trying to address those companies like Will's, like mine, like anybody else's, who are taking in consignment and property, real estate, whatever it is, and selling it on behalf of somebody else and charging a fee for those services. So I just want to make sure, because when you mentioned eBay, I just want to make sure everybody in the audience and those who might be listening understand that we're not talking about the normal seller, the typical seller. We're talking about people who are in the business of selling.
I appreciate your comment. I guess I'm not going to agree or disagree with what you're saying. But I guess, to further your point, if Grandma wants to sell Grandma's dolls, Grandma doesn't have the ability or technical, savvy to use eBay. She might want to go to one of those stores down the street.
And we feel like those people, because they are now dealing with Grandma's stuff, should have to have some type of education and oversight in dealing with Grandma's stuff.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know that I would agree with that, but I think it's worthy of consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else? We didn't beat him up too bad, I don't think.
I won't take much of the time. My name is Evan Namias. I'm here on behalf of Dealers Auto Auction Group, which is an auction group headquartered in Franklin, Tennessee. We own auctions in the Southeast, throughout the Southeast, and appreciate you taking your time to consider these. You've both made very interesting points as to the need for the protection of the public, some level of regulation, some opportunities for deregulation. I happen to have represented a number of taxi cab companies back before there was Uber and Lyft, and so I've watched a similar process. And the fact that you have opposing interests sitting at the table today, I think bodes well for the ultimate outcome. I'm interested to continue the discussion, and if I can help in any way, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Rye with Mannheim Auctions. We have 83 auctions in the U.S. and 121 globally, so we are definitely very interested in what's going on here today. I do think that the aspect of dual regulation is something that will probably come up throughout these conversations. Being in the automobile auction business, and we are the dealer-only auctions, so we don't deal with the public. It is dealers only that come to our auction, but we do have dual regulation by the Commission and by the Department of Motor Vehicles. So I appreciate the opportunity for us to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity for us to participate and give feedback and comment. I do think that there's some inconsistencies on the books today, that if this is an opportunity to do some cleanup work, that would also be helpful. I know the last meeting that I attended of the Auctioneer Commission is when some of those inconsistencies came to light, so I think it would be a good opportunity to fix some of those and to let the laws catch up with the world today. I know when we first started selling online, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but the laws hadn't caught up. So we had to send what would have been an auctioneer, which is your contract person and your finance person, to auction school together, and we each did half, and we both had to pass the test. And since then, some of the laws have caught up, but I think that the time is right now for us to get those laws caught up with where we are today.
Hello, Trey Mulhoen. I work for Butler Snow, and I'm here on behalf of Copart. Just wanted to echo what everybody has said here. Looking forward to the conversation. Obviously, concerns about double regulation, but would like to be a part of the conversation going forward. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ryan Swindle with the government relations firm here in Nashville, Windrow Phillips Group. We represent the Ritchie Brothers in Wilson County. I don't have the history that you all have, but I am looking forward to being a part of this conversation. And our concerns have been, as the legislation was discussed last session, are similar to Mr. McLemore's with the online. So we want to, we appreciate being a part of this and being here, and look forward to continued discussions. Thank you.
Else from the floor?
I just wanted to, Will, you had thrown a statistic about 6 states currently have online. It's actually 12 states have online licensing regulations out of the 25 states that currently have auction law. And I can provide you with a copy.
It's full. Thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering maybe if we can get copies of those just to take a look and see other states' approaches to this. It sounds like I'm hearing everybody thinks I should be able to stick my stuff on eBay, and nobody seems to want to do anything around that. But I was trying to take a look on my phone at the statute, and it's pretty small print. It didn't look like there's a lot of detail in what you guys are calling the eBay exemption. It's just basically like if it's offered for sale, it does mention the timed listing, and then it looks like that's what this legislation this past year was trying to do, was define exactly what a timed listing was. But if our main approach is making sure that the public has some protection without creating too much bureaucracy, I mean, we want to make sure we're not catching grandmas. I mean, maybe we put something in there to say clearly individuals offering things or not. But on the other end, if there's a fly-by-night operation that is somehow doing harm to the public, we could recognize that. And then there's, I said, the thing that I had brought up, if there are some well-established national platforms that it's like, this is clear, this is a corporation that's operating in good faith and doing what, I mean, maybe there could be an exemption on the other end that they don't have to be licensed in all states if they can meet certain criteria, and I wouldn't even know what that is in terms of bonding or financial resources or something, but a way of finding where is the actual problem coming from if there are complaints about some online vendors that may be operating disreputably.
Bill? There's already an exemption for principals in the same paragraph with the exemption for timed listings. So that's never been regulated. Meaning individual owners, they selling their own stuff.
Right.
That's already
Right.
exempt.
Which the faith of that law, I think, was for exactly what he alluded to for grandma and the dolls and things.
Anybody selling their own stuff, there's no regulation for them.
And we're not advocating that. Yeah.
Other comments? Yes, sir.
Tony Thompson again. I meant to ask, in the interest of all of us on this side of the podium, if there's an email distribution list, we'd love to be a part of that. And if there's internet access in this building or in this room, if this is where we're going to be meeting, we'd love to have the ability to be online and be able to look at statutes and that sort of thing on our possible. Thanks.
A little past me. Not knowing I was going to be on this thing. Mr. Lawrence, is it something that can be done?
Having never been a guest here, I'm uncertain of what internet we make available to guests. I will look into that. And if it's the task force desire that we send all of the documents that we are going to review out to the public, I'm certainly happy to do that as well.
I have a motion of that effect.
I make a motion we create an email list for the interested parties and that, if available, internet access be provided by the room we're in.
You just kind of covered it all there, didn't you? Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? With legal's approval.
Sure. And I'll ask my assistant to come down and put out a piece of paper in order to collect names and contact information for distribution of that.
Any other business? We want to go any further, or?
I think this is a good point for us to go back and we've all kind of figured out what we're all about and have some time to review what we have and maybe come back to the next meeting with some recommendations from each of us about things that we think could be changed or some language that could be used. If you have something specific that you would like to see introduced, be able to present that to the committee.
If I might add, if there are further documents that you'd like to see distributed, that those could be sent to me. What I have on my list right now to send out is laws, rules, future meeting dates, and then also, Jeff, you had asked about the number of complaints that we've received related to online auctions, and I think I can even potentially do you one better and further delineate that between the complaints that are generated from other licensees versus those that come from the general public.
Perfect.
Perfect. That'll hopefully be illuminating for the purpose of this task force.
Thank you, Carter.
Right. And Carter, can you make available when someone? I think it would be instructive if we meet on August 27th. If sometime maybe a week or so out, as a group, we provide some type of information about what we might be wanting to talk about. Because that way, if I want to come and I want to address some of the ideas that I have about how we can make the entry into the auction profession, it would be helpful if you guys had a little lead time to know that's what was going to be discussed, and any other topics. But just to walk in blind on August 27th and not know what anybody's going to talk about, I think might just prolong the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to that point, the chair could help in the creation of an agenda that could be posted with enough lead time to allow individuals to prepare. Would that?
Yeah, I feel like we'd be better served if we walked in here knowing we were going to talk about, apprenticeships or reciprocity or online auction as it applies to real estate or just whatever it's going to be. I just think that'd be instructive and helpful. Do we need that in form of a motion? Okay. Yeah, there we go.
Mr. Weaver's made a motion to adjourn, and I did hear it, sir.
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much.
All right. Hey, man, I need